Welcome to Ciclismo Fashion Week, Cycling Fashion Week, the only global podcast purely focused on the aesthetic items and elements of cycling from a completely and purely superficial point of view. I am your regular host, Alex. I am joined by my regular co-hosts, Warren and Tony. And as always, the podcast is brought to you by our good friends at Le Club. LeClub.cc is host to the world's most exciting and most elite cycling brands. It is your go-to destination for this season's hottest premium cycling apparel. LeClub.cc. Shop brands like MAP, The Service Course, Alba Optics, Fingers Crossed Socks, Quack Shoes. In fact, they just got a whole big shipment of the newest MAP collection, including this latest spruce jersey, which I think looks incredible. They do worldwide shipping. Demand more from your cycling experience, and also the best coffee in the business over at leclub.cc. More brands and categories are arriving soon. In fact, they just announced that a new brand was coming to leclub.cc. I don't think I can say which one yet because they didn't announce it, but definitely do go to leclub.cc to find out. Warren and Tony, how's it going this week?
It's going well. What you put the Ciclismo? What is the full Italian version of Cycling Fashion Week? Because you sort of half-assed it there.
La settimana della moda ciclista.
All right, that's
the week of cycling fashion.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I mean,
La semaine de la mode cycliste.
Maybe one time we'll get invited to Piediomo or something, and there'll be some.
We'll just be one of those. We'll just be one of those peacocks at Palazzo Pitti in Florence.
Yeah, will we wear Cannondale jerseys when we walk around?
Is this what's the story about the Cannondale jersey there?
Kanye's got a new girlfriend, Kim Kardashian look-alike, and I guess they were out to. I actually don't know what the context of where they went out to, but some sort
basketball game, I think, wasn't it?
Probably Lakers game, I guess. And she was wearing a Cannondale jersey as sort of her fashion-y top, but I would say it would look like it was kind of an early 2000s cut, sort of race club cut, short sleeves. I think she could have done something a lot nicer. She could have gone for
So she's definitely a listener, huh, to the podcast. I mean, if you've got these celebrities out there wearing cycling gear out in public, I think it's clear sign that our podcast has exploded in the general public.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, Kanye's always looking for info on fashion, so I'm sure he found it and then told her about it. She listened, and then decided that this was appropriate attire for I'm going to assume the Lakers game, because I assume
could be the Clippers.
No celebrity's going to see the Clippers game, especially Kawhi's been out. Anyways, we won't get into that stuff.
I also saw the Cannondale logo in there and made me think it was like a Cannondale Garmin jersey. When Vaughters' team was, it was either Cannondale Garmin or Garmin Cannondale, whatever. I don't think the colors are right for that, but with the cut of the jersey, that's what it made me think of. Whenever Phil Guyman was on that team and failed at it.
Felt even a little earlier. It felt like a 2006 vibe, maybe 2007. Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say, but the sleeves were too short. But speaking of jerseys out in public, there's been a little bit better, nicer weather for a couple of days here in Toronto. So Warren and I have been outside doing some laps and various things, and we've noticed possibly a change in the power rankings of cool kid cyclists kit apparel. And we've spoken for a long time about how Pas Normal is the driving force, the Captain Ahab of cycling clothing.
Is there a new sheriff in town?
There might be a new sheriff in town, because I would say we were riding around the CNE grounds, which is a popular loop for us here, kind of on weekday evenings. And we noticed that all the kind of cool kids were wearing MAP kit.
The new stuff or some older MAP
new
kit?
stuff? No, it looked like it was the Evade, or
I think it was like last year.
Oh, mostly. I thought it was the Evade stuff. I try kind of not to join other groups, so I didn't get too close. But I just feel like that particular group last year would have been all in Pas Normal. Mm-hmm. And then it's like the same type of cyclist that has now moved on to MAP. And it's like maybe MAP now has sort of got the right combination, and they're sort of usurping Pador Mal for the like hipster road cyclist, young, kind of like fashion forward, but also really trendy.
Yeah, one guy was actually wearing the exact same long sleeve map jersey that I was wearing, which, side note, I bought from the club before they sponsored us, just so our listeners don't think we're total sellouts. But yeah, it definitely, I got the same vibe as Tony. Like it just felt like that group last year would have been in Panorama, and now they're all in map. Some of them were even kind of matching, I think, or maybe just the color palettes were so similar it felt like they were matching.
Well, that's interesting. I guess we'll have to keep an eye out and update the listeners on how the power rankings change throughout the summer. But it seems right now like Map has, I was going to say, regained the top spot. Did they ever have it before? Or
they definitely had it, I think.
Yeah, I think they're maybe shorter period of time. I mean, Rafa was sort of king for a long time. Now Rafa's in almost its own stratosphere where it's going to be a lot of everyone's going to own some Rafa pieces. But
Rafa's like the Montreal Canadiens or the New York Yankees in the sense that they are the greatest like historical franchise that have won the most titles, but just hasn't been relevant for a long time now.
Yeah, I agree. But I think now, just sort of making that earlier comment, I'm now going to break my rule of really not talking to people that aren't part of my cycling group, and I'll ride up, at least get close enough so I can tell which release of the kit it is, because I do think from a journalist perspective, it's not fair to our listeners that I kind of was like a little bit distanced to get like specific of which collection. I just sort of saw it was Map and could tell. So next time I promise I'll ride up to the group a little closer and either ask them if I don't know, or definitely like get a good strong look so I can really know which collection we're talking is at the top of the power rank.
The people thank you for that, Tony. Now, for me, it's a little hard because I'm always in the front of the group. I'm always the guy pulling at the front, pushing the big watts. So it's very difficult for me to get a good sense of what people are wearing because I'm just looking at the road in front, you know.
I don't know why that comment reminded me of something. I just wanted to say one thing before we move on, because last week Tony made a big show about throwing cycling computers in the Canal and how he was going to ride without them this year. And he has. He's taken it off. He's taken off his mount. Good for him. But on the very first ride I did with him outdoors, when he didn't have his cycling computer, towards the end of the ride, he asked me how many kilometers we were at. So I know I predicted it was going to be a pain for me to like around like directions and stuff, but turns out I'm also going to be like tracking Tony's power and telling him how many watts he's putting out. And that's his solution for not using the cycling computer.
So much panache, though.
I really suggest it to everybody because people notice, oh, no computer, eh? Oh, you took the mount off. And it's really like, yeah, I'm just here for like the beauty of cycling and like the feeling of being outside. I don't need the numbers and staring at the screen and becoming obsessed. My body can tell me when I'm working hard.
It's true. It does look good. I can't deny that.
But Warren, you have to keep yours for directions when I come with you. But I won't ask you any more of how far we've gone. And I look at Strava for your average speed and power after, just to get a sense.
Definitely have the same power numbers given the like 30-pound weight difference.
Hey, I would say we're closer to 25 now.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, our first segment today, typically we do news releases, industry news as our first segment, but it's been a really slow couple of weeks here in the cycling fashion industry. And we actually got a bunch of listener questions that, by the way, thank you very much to listeners for sending us their moral dilemmas, their questions to us as the Global Cycling Style Authority so we can provide the definitive answer on it. You can always contact us, cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com, or hit us up in a DM on Instagram @cyclingfashionweek. But we actually got a couple of listeners provide questions to us that I thought were interesting and that we really needed to address here on the podcast. So we'll go to the first one. So Christophe from Montreal writes to us and he says, "Hey guys, I have two STEM related questions for you. Would you rather have a positive angle stem with no spacer underneath or a negative angle stem with a spacer underneath? In other words, does having your stem at least parallel to the ground, somewhat negatively angled, prevail on spacers under the stem?" That's the first question. And the second question is, are spacers above the stem as prohibited as spacers under the stem? So good questions. I think we've kind of given the answers to those questions in previous episodes, but here's our chance to deal with it definitively. And I also want to say we did review a bike for free on our last episode. It was Carlos from Australia. He had a nice Parley. He was fully decked out in attacker kit. It was beautiful, but we did, provide him a slight constructive criticism that his stem was a little bit too stacked and that he really needed to lower that and to really slam his stem and to mess up his back. And I want to say that Carlos was nice enough to write back to us and say, yes, guys, you are correct. I will fuck up my back for you. I'm going to remove all those spacers on my stem. I will slam the hell out of it. So thank you, Carlos, for doing what's right here. So anyway, back to Christophe's questions on the stem angle versus spacers, guys. What do we think about that?
Well, I actually responded to him, and I obviously have definitive knowledge on this type of stuff. So I told him a positive stem angle is prohibited at all costs. You cannot have a positive stem angle and then so a negative stem angle with spacers is preferable. Now, at the same time, if you need more than a 10 mil spacer, your bike just doesn't fit you. Like, you just have the wrong size bike. Now, I just want to make a caveat here because I know I posted pictures of my bike and I had a lot of spacers on it at the time. That was due to an injury, and I have recently gone and slammed the stem. It is no longer there. I had to get that when I got the bike made because I had broken my elbow and just needed a little bit of old man comfort. But I'm back to bending over and the back being bad. So I'm not being a hypocrite here. I think if you have a shattered elbow, you get a pass on some of this. But if your body's in decent working shape, then you shouldn't have any spacers. It should be slammed. If you're going to have a spacer, 10 mil, maybe 15, but probably not. And that's because if not, then you bought the wrong bike size and you need to go get a new bike.
I don't really have much to add to that. Never positive stem angle ever.
I do have one thing to add. I agree with you on the positive angle that these are never okay. You can never have a positive stem angle. I think parallel to the ground level is okay. I think that should be the baseline. Now, Tony, you did say something. You said negatively angled with some spacers was preferable to the positive angle. Totally agree with this. That being said, I think negative angle with one spacer, 10 mil, 15 mil at most, is good. Negatively angled with two spacers, Canal cannot do that because at that point, you might as well remove a spacer and have it be parallel to the ground at that point. I think that would be better. But one spacer, negative angle, I think that's permissible or allowed, but anything more than that is a no-go from my perspective. And if you have back problems, it's signs that you are on the right track.
And on the note of back problems, if, as I said, if you need a positive angle stem to be comfortable on the bike, just buy a bike with one of those endurance models or something that just has a geometry that will allow you to run a negative stem instead. Don't buy the new Alley Sprint or something. I was looking at the geometry to those bikes and they're just hurting my back just looking at it. It's much more important to have a bike that looks clean and rather than buy some hot race bike, but you need a +7 positive stem to feel comfortable riding it for longer than an hour.
Well, how about buying the hot race bike and still slamming your stem and just being incredibly uncomfortable on it? That seems okay acceptable with me.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
I mean, the realistic answer here, because we all did it, and I feel like every cyclist that doesn't is kind of just not really trying, is you get a custom geometry bike so that you can sort of cheat the slam stem by building it around kind of a more comfortable position where you don't need to compensate. So anyone out there who's saying, oh, I don't know about the fit, I really feel I need these spacers, Canal your bike and then just go and get a custom. Some carbon companies are making custom too if you're really a carbon fan, but we like metal bikes, and go get a titanium, aluminum, steel custom geometry bike, and then you can get that slammed look and you can kind of cheat it to be a bit more comfortable.
Okay. All right. So that was the first listener question that we got this week. Now, the second listener question that we got, now this one is a slightly touchy, or it's a slightly controversial one, but we don't shy away from controversy here at Cycling Fashion Week. But essentially, a listener wrote to us and said, "Hey guys, there is a brand that you've never talked about that I would like you to address on Cycling Fashion Week." And the brand is called Brandt-Sorenson. Actually, Warren, how about you introduce this one? Because you're a little bit more familiar with this guy's overall body of work than I am.
Sure. Now, I'm going to choose my words carefully because I've been following this guy and this brand for a while for a couple of reasons. There was a cycling tips article about the owner and I assume the fabricator and tailor of Brandt-Sorenson. His name is Nick Brandt-Sorenson. He also goes by the name, I believe it's Thorfinn Sasquatch on Strava, and he owns a number of KOMs in the LA area, or at least used to. And now, if you Google Thorfinn Sasquatch cycling tips, you'll find the article I'm talking about. Now, the reason I'm being a little careful with my wording is he allegedly was arrested and convicted for selling EPO to some people. Allegedly. I don't know. Read the article, read the story. I haven't read follow-up articles, so I don't fully know what came out of that.
From our good friends over at Cycling Tips.
Yeah, from our great friends at Cycling Tips. Anyway, so that's when I believe I first heard about him. I started following him on Strava just out of curiosity to see how many KOMs he would rack up. It's a lot. I think he followed me back, actually. I don't follow him anymore. I haven't for a few years. Anyway, through this article, I also became aware of his clothing brand, Brandt-Sorenson, because if you go onto their website, you'll see it's actually some quite nice clothing, but the kind of the unique selling proposition of his brand is basically it's all made to measure, tailored for you. So it's like getting a bespoke suit, but it's like a custom cycling kit, in the same way all three of us have custom bikes, you could go through him to basically get a completely custom kit. And, the prices are high, but honestly, considering it's made to measure and with the way kit prices are going, they're not that high. Like, I think the bibs are between $300-$500. And
actually, I think Warren, I think the jerseys are like $600 US.
Oh, are they?
Yes, okay. I checked it out, and that's roughly what it goes.
That's pretty expensive. But
it's in line with the idea that you're getting it made to measure. It's cut for you. It's sewn for you. It's the equivalent of flying to Naples to get your suit made, basically.
Yeah. And so beyond that, there's another reason why, or I think I started following his brand, the brand's Instagram account because of this. Because as I said, there's a lot of nice designs. Some are kind of classic, some are maybe a little bolder, but he's developed a bit of a reputation for calling out some of the larger mainstream clothing brands for copying his designs. And I think that's part of the reason this listener asked us to weigh in on this. And we actually had a second listener also ask us our opinion on him and the fact that it's often Panormal, from what I've seen, is he's calling out Panormal for copying some of his designs, and he'll post screen caps from his website and then some screen caps from Panormal's website or off their Instagram or product shoot, whatever. There's some debate among people of how much these brands are actually copying him. I would also say there's a strong likelihood if he finds his way to this podcast episode, he's going to message us to comment on whatever we say. And I just happen to know that because I think he's fairly active on Instagram. I know we're all going to talk about it. I'll just quickly give my take, because I think through some of the times I've seen the post the listener sent from 2019, it was comparing a jersey he had that was mostly white with 3 stripes across the chest, 2 yellow and, or no,
2 blue and 1
blue
yellow.
And 1 yellow. And it said Oregon on it. So it was probably inspired by some Oregon design. Anyway, and then there was a Panormal jersey with a very similar stripe. That I think is a legit stripe he would have there, depending on, time of production on that. I think it's fair he's questioning that. But I've also seen a post from in the past where it felt like he was basically suggesting that his color palette selection was unique, so if you pick marigold, no one else can ever make a marigold jersey. You know what I mean? So that's what I'll say just to kick it off. And that's sort of the context behind this brand and the story and why he, or what some people might be aware of his place in the cycling fashion world.
So I've been following for a long time because I think before Phil Gaiman got really annoying, his sort of like KOM thing started to take away the KOMs from this guy because he was a no doper, and that a lot of the KOMs around the LA area he had done most likely well doped up. And so Phil Gaiman and his clean quest was to sort of rewrite the wrongs of the dopers, even in the recreational thing. So I sort of been following for a while, and I think you're right. Like, he makes really beautiful stuff, and made to measure. The prices are pretty hard to get behind if you can't afford it. Like, a lot of cycling prices are hard to get behind, but these are just like a little bit more up. And I think if it's something you can afford, a lot of the stuff he talks about is correct about, making sure it fits well and certain environmental things, because he's sort of making it in a smaller batch. The problem is, and I've seen his stuff, and people have sent me stuff knowing that we do this podcast, is that he's so aggressive about his place in the cycling fashion world, and both in the sense of like, why are you buying a company that manufactures in a sort of a large scale way? You should be buying from me. And it's like, okay, well, you're in a kind of a different category, right? Like, that's like someone coming up and be like, why do you have, maybe not even a Honda, but like, why do you have that Audi? You should have this Porsche. And you're like, okay, well, like, I spent a lot of money on the Audi, but I can't get to Porsche level. Like, but I think more importantly, it's like the design stuff he has is nice. And I'm sure some of it is very like kind of on his own, but a lot of it is sort of generic design that's existed forever. And he kind of criticizes these other brands as if he invented it. Like, he's got a blue and white striped jersey. Is he sending messages to the French Navy being like, hey, you stole my blue and white stripe look? Like, there's a lot of these kind of things and these color palettes that are just kind of popular around all of fashion. Like you said, the marigold and sort of the earth tones have just been like, even non-cyclists have been wearing that as kind of like, that's just what's in the ether of sort of fashion design. And he's pulling from it, and Panorama's pulling from it, and Map's pulling from it. So he just has this like tone of superiority, which just isn't really fair. And it's kind of annoying, even though I think a lot of the stuff he does is really good quality, and I'm not against him doping.
Yeah, the tone is a bit rich sometimes, and especially he's got like a KOM jersey, which is from the Tour de France, unless, maybe he invented that. I think that's fair point. And, that's probably part of the reason we have people kind of asking us to weigh on this is just when you come out like that and make these bold claims or yeah. And it's, to your point, Tony, it's like most of us can't afford to drop $550 on a jersey, a custom jersey, good as it might be, and so and it's not like paying $250 for a Map jersey or a Panorama jersey or Attacker or whatever. Like, it's not like that's fast fashion. You know what I mean? It's not like you're going to H&M or going to AliExpress and getting some spec sell like Tony does. It's
spec sell. By the time it takes to get here, that is slow fashion.
Yeah, fair enough. But you know what I mean? So it's just kind of weird. It's like something like Attacker is a relatively small business, I would imagine.
Warren.
Attacker. Or even Panorama, in the scheme of things, isn't like a massive business. Like, Rafa's obviously a pretty large business, but still, it's relatively, it's just such a strange thing to be claiming. And like, anybody who has Google and computer and you Google this brand name, you're probably going to find the cycling tips article. So if he wants to know why more people aren't buying his brand, maybe he should go read that cycling tips article again.
Yeah. So the stuff is beautiful. I mean, you look at what he's producing, and it's this aesthetically very pleasing to look at. I'm sure it's great to wear. And, I don't know, I might disagree a little bit on the price. I don't think it's a crazy price to pay for something that's hand sewn in a small, atelier in Los Angeles. Like, you're supporting a small artisan who's making this by hand. And it's, if you've ever seen the price of bespoke suits, like, it's definitely in the ballpark of what you would pay for that. Is it for everyone? Would I, for example, go bespoke for a kit? I don't think so. I don't have a body that's that, unique in terms of its shape such that I would need that. But I definitely see the value of that. And even for someone who has a pretty standard, regular, body that fits pretty much a regular medium in any brand, I could see that there's a certain pleasure in saying, well, I got that made for myself and I supported a small artisan in the process. And I think the stuff he makes is beautiful as well. Now, his persona, I'm going to agree with you guys, it can be a little bit off-putting, in terms of he doesn't play nice with the community, if you will. The doping stuff doesn't bother me too much personally. First of all, they're allegations, so I don't know. I don't know, allegations. I'm a little bit uneasy, to cancel him because of that. And also, as a Lance fanboy myself, I'm in no position to cancel him for the doping allegations. So that doesn't bother me so much. Now, the fact that he might have distributed EPO is maybe something else. But yeah, and I think actually Warren is telling me that he was convicted. So
of distributing
it. Now, did he dope during his KOMs? We don't know. We can perhaps think that he was, but we don't know. We don't know that for sure. But anyway, just
sorry, Alex. Let me just add one other thing to the doping thing. Is the reason there was suspicion, according to the Cycling Tips article, that he was doping is he's quite a large person and he was getting all these climbing KOMs. That added to the suspicion. That's all. I forgot to mention that.
Whatever. KOMs, like, I don't know, man. KOMs on Strava. Who gives a fuck? Like it. Tony was saying about deleting Strava. I'm long past Strava. Like I don't care about that. Let's just talk about the brand. Yeah, the stuff's beautiful, but his copyright infringement claims are ludicrous. Like the ones that Warren, the one you said that actually made sense. The white jersey with the two blue lines and the yellow line in the middle. Sure, Pat Allman made one that kind of looks like it. I mean, is he going to sue the Australian national champion kit that has two green lines and a yellow line in the middle? Like, come on. These are just such, basic designs that have been there forever. Tony mentioned the French Marinière sweater, which has been around forever. Is he going to sue that? I was just thinking, actually, the Russian paratroopers that are getting captured all over the place in Ukraine in this disastrous invasion, they're also wearing stripes under their camo, which he also has camo jerseys, by the way, which I hate camo jerseys, never wear that. But his other stuff is very nice. Anyway, these copyright infringement claims are bogus. Like everyone kind of inspires themselves with other stuff like solid color jerseys. Like, you invented that color? Come on. That being said, the claims might be a marketing strategy. We're talking about him right now. People are talking about him on Instagram. So maybe he doesn't actually believe in the marketing, in the copyright infringement claims that he makes, just like I don't believe in half the takes I give on this podcast.
They're obviously a small company, small brand, and probably can't afford to advertise too much. But side note, DM us for our advertising rates. They're quite reasonable.
And actually, message to Thorfinn Sasquatch, if you want to come on the podcast and discuss this, you are more than welcome to do so. We do not shy away from controversy. And like I said, we think your stuff is actually really nice.
No, I just want to say with Alex, I'll tell you what the cost. Like, again, I agree with you. I think the cost relative to the product you're getting is great. But it's just, there's a lot of things in the world where if I had the money, I would buy the higher end product, but just getting to that price point is hard. Cycling is expensive. I'm not against it. Like, I think it's great. If you have the money, I think you should do it. I think, he makes a lot of environmental claims. I don't do research on how much bespoke stuff helps the environment, but if you sort of write on it, that's great. And so if you can afford it, I'm not against it. I think he makes beautiful stuff, but it's still a hard price point to get behind, even if you can justify a 350 Panorama bibs. Because it's just that next level. It's the Patek just above the Rolex.
Patek is considerably above Rolex, but
okay, yeah. Sorry. It's the Richard Mille above the Patek.
Sure, whatever. Okay, next segment, the Panache Police, where basically the Panache Police is just basically a collection of rants, opinions about anything in the world of cycling fashion. This week, we are doing our power rankings of our own individual top 5 small bicycle brands at the moment. I say at the moment because that might change over time. As we discussed earlier, our kit power rankings have changed a little bit recently. And if you'll recall, I'd say about 2-3 months ago, we did a top 5 kit brands for each of the different hosts that we discussed on the podcast. So today we're going to do our top 5 small bike brands. And when I say small bike brands, we're basically excluding the huge brands like Trek, Giant, Cannondale, Specialized. We're just going to, completely exclude these guys to focus on the smaller bike makers. And I do want to mention that we did not share our results together amongst ourselves before recording this. So this is sort of a live discovery of each other's top 5 small bike brands. So here we go.
All right, I want to make it clear here that this is an aesthetic choice. I think I don't know their top 5, but in most cases, probably the bike brands in this we have not ridden. So in terms of ride quality and all these other things, this is not what I personally am judging mine on. So if someone says, oh, that bike's garbage, it's actually this, it was manufactured here or something, I don't care, because I'm just saying this bike looks great and I would want to own it. So with that being said, my number 5 is out of San Francisco, a company called Low Bicycles. Now I'm putting them in my top 5 because when I got into cycling through road cycling through sort of the fixie culture. At the time I was getting into the fixie culture. San Francisco fixie scene was really big. They had Match FS and Macaframa who were making these kind of skate style fixie videos. And it so I was really sort of not being in San Francisco, but as a fan, I was very entrenched in San Francisco, and Andrew Lowe was making these bikes, and it was just a bike that was so cool. They're high-end premium aluminum. I just think they look amazing, and it was definitely a bike that I had sort of dreamed of getting. I didn't get one when I got my bike, but it's still on my list.
Some of our listeners might know because we've posted my bike, because I own a Lowe. My custom bike that we talk about is a Lowe road bike. It's the MK2 disc, and yeah, so Lowe is going to appear on my list as well, not surprisingly. But I just wanted to say, it's Tony is actually. I think I heard about Lowe because of Tony, and I bought my bike through Blacksmith in Toronto. That's a shop we mentioned a lot, but it was one of the few metal frame builders they worked with that I went through. And yeah, I can't say I love the aesthetics of the bike, and when I talk about it, I'll go in a bit more, but I obviously am going to agree with you since I own one. For my number 5, I feel like this is one you guys are going to roast me a bit, if you even know them. It's a guy out of Santa Cruz, California, and his brand is called Rock Lobster. And he makes aluminum and steel bikes. He's made, I believe he used to have a cyclocross team. So not surprising. That's how I heard of Rock Lobsters, through cyclocross. Specifically, I think the American cyclocross scene saw some people riding them. And I'm a fan of utilitarian metal bikes, and that's what this is. And I got to admit, I like the name is weird. It's not a conventional bike name. Obviously, something like Trek or Cannondale is maybe a weird name, but I like that there's a little bit of humor to it. There's probably some story behind it that I don't know. I like he's got kind of a fun lobster logo, and it's very much in that cyclocross ethos that you guys are not huge fans of. I think it fits in that world, and I like it because of that. And I think it's the little weird lobster logo makes them unique and stand out.
So the frame seemed nice, but the name, no, I can't. I couldn't and it's down the top too. It's big. I can't write it. Hey,
I love it.
Hey man, tell me, if I ever go on a ride with Dustin Klein, he's like, hey man, tell me your bike. And I'm like, oh, it's a Rock Lobster. He's kind of a rad Oregon dude, so he'd be okay with it, but I can't have those words coming out of my mouth.
Does the Red Lobster restaurant still exist? Or it just
yeah, it does.
That's what it evokes in my mind. I'm like Tony, I couldn't handle the name.
See, I was thinking of is it a B-52 song? The song.
Oh God, I didn't think of that. That's a horrible association.
Is that B-52s? Am I an idiot? Who is that?
They have a song that's something like that.
Yeah, it's the B-52s, the Rock Lobster. That's a bad song.
Man. I might have to change that.
That's a very irritating song.
If I'd known about the B-52s Association, I never would have put it on my list.
I'll do my number 5. So my number 5 smaller bike brands that I enjoy. My 5 is Speedwagon out of Portland, Oregon. So they were, I'm not going to say they were the first. Obviously, there's a ton of people that have been making beautiful custom steel bike for a long time. But in terms of their presence on social media and bold, aggressive paint jobs, they were, I would say, sort of pioneers in that space, and they've always made really unique looking paint jobs. Also one thing I really like about Speedwagon is how they integrate the pump, the frame pump onto the frames, and then they allow you to custom paint that as well along with your bike. That's actually more complicated than people think, getting the frame pump painted to the same color as your frame. And they also do like pretty complicated paint schemes on their bike. They're not all ones that I would want to own, but I also don't need to own everything. I can just kind of appreciate it from afar. They make titanium, they make steel, but it's their sort of dedication to steel that I really enjoy. And the way they also paint the stems and the pumps, I think is really outstanding. And Speedwagon out of Portland, Oregon, my number 5.
Yeah, I love it. I think they've done great stuff. They were kind of one of the first sort of smaller steel bike brands that I noticed kind of coming up on social media. I think they do great marketing. A lot of their bikes have really cool details. I know kind of at the rear dropouts, they sometimes have their kind of little V, because I guess it's their parent company's called like Vanilla Cycles. And a lot of those little unique things, those little touches that I've always liked in any sort of design they do. And they kind of go wild, from very wild colorways to sometimes they have completely monochrome stem, seat post, same color, looks beautiful. I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, they're beautiful bikes. I also appreciate how they will randomly make these like offshoot commuter bikes. Like I think they made a single speed commuter with coaster brakes a couple of years ago that was still outrageously expensive, but it's made in the US, all that. Still nice bike. So I appreciate that they also do things like that on top of the kind of classic road, all road gravel, et cetera, et cetera. Again, they used to have a cyclocross team. They might still. So I also appreciate that.
Okay, Warren, number 4. What do you got?
So for number 4, this is actually somebody I mentioned last week, I think. And that Sklar bikes made by Adam Sklar. Now, again, metal bikes. He hand makes them, I think, somewhere in like Montana or something. I'm probably getting that wrong. He is known for what I mentioned before is he makes a lot of mountain bikes, but he also makes gravel and road bikes. And he's known for this slightly curving top tube on almost all of his bikes that the reason I like it is we talk a lot about sometimes like you can only break the rules once you know all the rules. And I can easily picture his frames with a horizontal top tube and they would look like beautiful metal bikes, but that slight curve in the top tube makes them uniquely his. And I don't think they're so outrageous that they're like distracting. In fact, particularly on any of the road and gravel models, it almost forms a little apex between the two of the wheels. And maybe that was intentional design choice. I'm not really sure. And I actually know he does hand make his frames, but I was reading something on the Radavist recently. I think he just started making some like more affordable frames that are actually built in Taiwan, which is like an interesting choice. So he's offering this new model called the Super something that are actually produced in Taiwan, but are like $1,500 or $1,600 US for a frame, which is pretty reasonable. Because obviously his custom frames are quite a bit more because he works with steel and titanium, I believe. Anyway, I'm a fan. I like his logo. It's kind of just a simple script font of his last name. And yeah.
Yeah, I really want to hate it because it goes against a lot of what I believe in sort of bike frame geometry, but I don't. I really don't. Like I want to say, oh, the stupid curve thing, but I'm looking at it's, especially the mountain bikes. I never really find mountain bikes, but I look at some of the gravel bikes and stuff in his kind of latest build category on his website, and like even with this weird little top tube, like they look nice. They're nice looking bikes. I really want to talk shit. I love talking shit about people's bikes and stuff, but I actually think it looks really nice. I don't know if I personally, similar to what Alex said, sometimes you can like stuff from afar. I don't know if personally I own one, but I have no problem with it. I think it's kind of neat.
I can't do the curve on the top tube personally. It doesn't work for me, and the Mountain Bike Association also kind of ruins it for me. Also, I've never found a mountain bike beautiful. Personally,
No,
the way that the shape, the angle of the top tube, the way that the bars are above the seat, it just doesn't do it for me. I can't I can't appreciate that.
Sorry, Alex, I just want to quickly note, Marinoni makes triathlon bikes, right?
I think I'd rank.
That's even worse.
I think I'd rank triathlon bikes above mountain bikes. Personally.
That's another discussion, but you're wrong.
Yeah, I'm with Warren. Triathlon bikes are the ugliest things that's ever existed.
Okay, number 4, Tony, what do you got?
I'm hesitant to put this as number 4, not because of the bike brand itself, but because of the owner of the bike brand, who lives in Toronto, or one of the owners. And I have gone on about 10 rides with him, and each ride he introduces himself to me. And I don't know if he's big timing me, if it's a power move, if he just really doesn't remember who I am, but it's kind of frustrating, and I find it a little bit rude. But unfortunately, he is a part owner of a bike company called Number 22, which makes beautiful titanium bikes. I think because of his association with Toronto and with Blacksmith, there's a lot, for such an expensive bike, there are a lot around Toronto. So I've got an opportunity to see a lot in person and know a couple people who ride them, and they are really gorgeous titanium bikes. They had a two-tone. They do also some great camp and YOLO builds. So yeah, the owner is big timing me, but the bikes are big time.
I agree about the bikes looking amazing. Like I've seen a number around Toronto too for the same reasons. I'm kind of curious how well known Number 22 are outside of Toronto or Canada. I feel like they got to be known pretty well.
I think they're technically made in New York. Like, I think they're a New York brand, they call themselves. So I'm sure they're popular around the Eastern United States.
They post photos of a bunch from, I think, in Singapore. Anyway, like riders who have them, but they've won a bunch of like best bikes at NABS, I think, maybe more than once. But I've always just been curious because I think they're like, I'm with you. They're like incredibly nice bikes. They do the raw titanium really well. Like, I think if you're going to buy a titanium bike, you gotta buy just the raw finish. But they do some interesting adenoized color things as well, which I appreciate. I wouldn't do that myself, but I think they do the raw look better than almost any titanium bike brands out there, personally. So yeah, I fully agree.
Okay, so my number 4, I think there's going to be a lot of metal bikes on this top 5 list. I might try to work in one carbon maker in there, but my number 4 is actually Belle Cycles out of Barcelona. Kiko Belle, he is an Italian guy who moved to Barcelona in 2010 to make, again, beautiful custom steel bicycles. So he's actually interesting in the sense that he doesn't think steel necessarily is only a vintage thing that belongs in the past. He's really bringing steel into the future, innovating with steel, really building his bikes with modern techniques and modern components. The welds on the steel are incredibly subtle, very beautiful to look at, amazing paint jobs, custom stuff. Obviously, you can juice whatever paint you like, but overall his designs for the color schemes are pretty unique, pretty beautiful. I like that he has really thin looking tubes in some cases as well, but also the way that he works in the group set with internal routing just looks incredibly modern. I don't know how much the bikes retail for, but they're absolutely beautiful. And just a true beauty to look at. Would love to maybe go to Catalonia one day to ride and get my hands on one for a few rides. That would be an incredible thing to do. His bikes are so beautiful that he makes gravel looks beautiful, which is no small feat in my opinion. Gravel stuff's always ugly, but in this case, his gravel model is just a beauty to look at. So he's my number 4.
He's got some of the best tube proportions I've seen, where it's a little kind of thick. The tubes are a little thicker, the head tube and the down tube, and then they're a bit narrower on the top tube and the seat tube, and then even narrower on the stays. And it's just enough that there's nothing outrageous. It's just really clean lines, really nice, really great proportions of the tubes, like I said. And even their gravel bikes. So again, their gravel bikes look like an extension of a road bike, like a beautiful road bike that you've thrown some thicker tires on and maybe a 1x or something. So I think that's a great choice for number 4. My number 3 is Marinoni out of, it's not quite Montreal, but let's say Montreal, Quebec. That's what I own. I've spoken about it a lot. I put pictures on the Instagram. I lived in Montreal for many, many years. That's where I got into road cycling. They were one of kind of the first sort of cool brands outside of the big boys that I sort of heard of. A friend of mine, he got a custom track bike made from them, Went to the factory. I just thought it was so cool. They were always in my top 5 forever as a dream bike to own, and now I own one, and I'm super stoked on it. And so Marinota is my number 3.
I was going to have them in my top 5, but I knew that you would put them in your top 5, so I excluded it. But I just want to put it out there that they are definitely in my psychological top 5, even though I didn't bring it up tonight because I also own one. Okay, Warren, you're number 3.
There's so many nice smaller bike brands that are like kind of like on my radar. Like number 22, as Tony mentioned, was like one I thought about, and but then as I was putting together this list, I realized I could very easily have a list of like 5 brands that kind of looked exactly the same. Like for my number 3, I'm actually going to go with a brand that doesn't even make road bikes. So they're called HL. They make bikes in Belgium, and they make commuter bikes. They make some very beautiful steel Euro style commuters. They got the step through. They got kind of like the more like roadster kind of things. A friend of Tony and I's, also named Alex, call him Vancouver Alex because he moved to Vancouver. He bought one of these a couple of years ago for his city commuter bike, and it is painted in a really sleek black. It's got matching fenders. It is, in my mind, like a beautiful looking city bike should be. Saying it's got the fenders. I think it's got like a little rack. It's very practical. But for a city bike, it's like, I don't know about where you live, but in Toronto, there's a lot of people riding really shitty bikes as their commuter bikes, like old mountain bikes. They got bikes you bought at Walmart or whatever. People they buy the cheapest piece of junk that'll roll, and they ride it until their drivetrains are all rusted out. I feel like this is probably common in a lot of cities. Anyway, I was just really impressed by the bike itself, and it was a reasonable price for a commuter. I think it was like $1,200 he paid, but it's just like a really nice steel frame. And the reason I'm listing as my number 3 is I think everybody should have a really nice and really stylish commuter bike, because it's one thing, we all look great on the road in our kit, blah, blah, blah. But as Tony often likes to say, he likes to take his style off the bike. And I try to do that too. And this is something I want to get a bike like HL, or there's another brand out of Finland I like as well. But to just kind of just also have a really nice, stylish commuter bike. So I know I'm like going a little maybe out of our normal wheelhouse here, but I think they're metal bikes. So, I mean, like them for that reason, but they're just kind of the nicest commuter looking bikes you can find.
I didn't know we were going there, but we make our own rules in this podcast, so I appreciate that, Warren. But these are beautiful. They have the classic, what we call the Dutch bike look, very sort of classic, absolutely gorgeous bikes, heavy and sturdy, what you need for commuting, what you need for grocery shopping. This style of commuter is what's needed, because I think what happens is a lot of people don't want to ride their bike outside of sort of either a fitness thing or a place where they know they can shower. And I think one of the reasons the Dutch and the Danish are so into biking, can do it for, do it all year round, is they have these bikes that are so sturdy, fully covered drive trains, fenders, really comfortable upright. So even if you're in sort of nicer attire, or going to the office, or going out to a night out for dinner, this is a comfortable, nice bike to ride. So even though you went a little off script, Warren, great choice.
You guys are in the Canal. I didn't think this podcast was about commuters, let alone Tony talk about biking. What is biking, Tony? Are you a biker? This was the biggest Canal discussion we've ever had on this podcast. I'm going to move right on to my number 3 so we can hopefully forget about that segment. My number 3 is Firefly bicycles out of my beloved city of Boston, Massachusetts. Why am I putting them up there? I love titanium. I aspire to one day owning a titanium bike as part of my rotation. There's nothing as beautiful as these gray metal tubes of titanium. And I believe that Firefly bicycles, again, out of Boston, Massachusetts, they make some of the better looking titanium bikes out there. The finishing on those bikes is incredible. The geometry is beautiful. They're not cheap, but they are a thing of beauty. And I titanium is tricky, right? Because some people try to paint titanium, but it's not really the right thing to do. You kind of want to go metal colored with titanium. But I've seen some Fireflies where they incorporate the sort of rainbow tinted titanium metal, so to speak. You do see some of those bottle cages sometimes that are titanium, and there's a bit of a rainbow vibe to them. And I've seen some Firefly bikes that have that, and it's absolutely beautiful. They also, find a way to incorporate frame pumps on it, which I really appreciate. And it seems like a really sort of well-made, very nicely finished titanium bicycle that I would like to one day potentially own.
Firefly bikes, beautiful bikes. I hate the name. I don't like
It's not as bad
logo.
as Rock Lobster, though.
No, I agree. I would agree. Especially because there's no, as far as I know, no B-52 song called Firefly, but who knows? I don't.
Yeah, the name's terrible, and I actually think that some of their like anodizing and sort of stuff is no. I think there's a lot of nicer titanium bikes, so I sort of can't agree with you on this one.
Okay, Warren, number 2.
I got to do a late switch out because Tony already talked about number 22. You just did Firefly. I was going to list Mosaic as number 2 for me because I feel like they're titanium bikes. They're like the epitome of a dream titanium bike for me. And you could basically take the description you just gave of Firefly, and I would just say the same thing about Mosaic. Anyway, but I'm going to do a late switch up because when you talked about Belle cycles, what's your Belle?
Yeah.
You reminded me of how I found out about them, which is actually by knowing about this brand called Ligor Cicli out of Barcelona. They're handmade steel bikes built in Barcelona by a guy named Mattia Paganotti. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. The reason you reminded me of them is there's this like cycling influencer photographer, Tristan Take Photo. I don't know if you guys follow him. He takes a lot of photos. He also races. And for several years, he was on this Ligor Cicli steel road bike, and he was like crushing KOMs and winning all these races. He lives in Girona. He says he's a photographer. I honestly don't understand how he lives this incredible cycling lifestyle where he seems to train like 20 hours a week. Anyway, he has this beautiful Ligor Cicli road bike. I think it was featured by our good friend Cycling Tips in their Bikes of the Bunch feature. Beautiful bike. And then he got a Belle gravel bike. So that's how I heard about Belle. And that's what reminded me of Ligor. And that's why I'm doing this really late switch out, is because I felt like we talked enough about titanium bikes. And I remember how much I like Ligor, and like it would be my ideal steel bike. Like I would probably honestly want to get one to replace my Richie as like he does make a cyclocross model. Yeah, I think they're beautiful bikes. And I just wanted to add one other thing. Another reason why I remembered it is this influencer, Tristan Take Photo. I think earlier this year, he was sponsored by BMC. So now all of his photos, he's riding a BMC team machine. And when I saw that, I was just like, I get it, you're sponsored, but like
sponsorship isn't worth it when you could ride when you own a beautiful bike like the Ligor Cicli, and then you say, okay, it's great to get free stuff, but I'll say no to the sponsorship.
Does he run SRAM on his BMC?
I think he does. Yeah, maybe he's getting paid. Who knows? But like, I don't know. For me, I was just like, it's not worth it. Challenge me, BMC, offer us free bikes. I'm going to turn you down.
Okay, Tony, number 2.
Number 2, out of Germany. We've talked about them before. We would love them to come on the podcast. We love them to sponsor us as well. Standard bicycles. I think aluminum and steel, absolutely beautiful stuff. Incredible paint jobs. In the conversation we've had about stems, if you go on their Instagram, and every bike they sort of post or sort of with influencers riding and stuff like that, how they slam their stem is exactly how your bike should look. Their sort of marketing material for their bikes, the way they sort of organize it with the drop of the seat, the slam stem, the length of the stem, everything is perfect. Their colorways are great. Their geometry is great. Standard, number 2.
I was also going to put them in my top 5, but Tony, I know you so well that I knew you would put them in your top 5. So similarly to Marinoni, I decided to leave it out just because I knew that one of you two would bring them up. Standard, yeah, very good brand. All right, let's do my number 2. I've talked about them before on the podcast. Stelbel out of Italy. Stelio Belletti, beautiful steel frames, founded in 1973. In northern Italy. Just, I mean, your classic Italian steel making of frames, basically, and the way they paint the stems to be, and then the seat posts to be the same color as the overall bike. Classic geometry. The top tube is perfectly level with the ground. Just really beautiful stuff, timeless. You could own it. You were able to own this 20 years ago. You can own it in 20 years from now. It's going to look beautiful. I know we talk a lot about, I want to own this, I want to buy that. But if there was one bike that you could just buy once and kind of forget about it and ride it for the rest of your life, I think this would be it pretty much. So Sterbel out of Italy, that's my number 2. Okay, Warren, what's your numero uno?
I also know Tony very well, but I didn't actually anticipate he would put Lowe in his top 5. And I'm just going with Lowe as my number 1 because while I would admit they might not be my number 1 aesthetic choice, I kind of just going fully irrational with it because I really do like the aesthetic of the bike, and I actually think the look of the oversized down tube, it's almost becoming like a retro look now with the way bike design's going, with aero frames and stuff. So it kind of has this late 2000s like aluminum race bike look to it. Doesn't have drop seat stays. His welds are, I want to say Andrew Lowe has the best welds in the cycling frame building game. Like they're so smooth, and like if you see them in person, when I was picking my frame up, a couple old dentist seeming guys were like, "Whoa, is that carbon?" and like things like that, and they were admiring like the welds of the frame, and the paint finish was all great. Yeah, I think the whole experience of riding the bike and having owned it really kind of transformed cycling for me because I was on riding other bikes. I was on a CAD 10 for I don't know, like 5 years, and that was a perfectly fine bike and my sort of window into the cycling world and just cycling as exercise, blah blah blah. But it wasn't really until I got my Lowe that I really started just like fully embracing just in all aspects and really wanting to look and feel kind of at my best on the bike. So that's why I put it at number 1.
I like Lowe. I just wish their logo were bigger on the frame. Okay, Tony, your number 1?
My number 1 is out of Verona, Italy, Dario Pegoretti. Unfortunately, Dario himself has passed away a couple of years ago, but these are not bicycles. These are works of art. I think the company is still around. I have met a few people who have owned them. Our good friend Prempton from Alpha Velo owned one. These are the most beautiful bikes ever made, from the tubing and the geometry they use to the incredibly unique and wild paint schemes that, as I understand it, you don't get a say in, or at least at the time Dario was running it. These things are just jaw-dropping, and I think the weight line is forever. I think the price is probably pretty high, but when we talk about dreams of dreams, for my aesthetic, especially because of the way the paint color is similar to kind of some of the abstract art, these are just pieces of beauty. I don't even know if you want to ride it. You just want to hang it on your wall. So
I'm gonna segue into my number 1 because both Warren and Tony stole my thunder. My number 1 is actually Ligor Cicli out of Barcelona. And I was actually going to mention that the founder of Ligor, Mattia Pagnotti, it seemed like he was inspired, or he learned with Dario Pegoretti as well. And it seems like Dario Pegoretti was a bit of a master frame builder to a lot of other traditional steel frame builders, and Mattia Pagnotti was one of them. So Ligor, I mean, the most beautiful steel bikes I've ever seen.
Besides the Dario Pegoretti.
Okay. But just again, there's a model that Ligor makes. It's called the Rotonda model. And if you go to their website, you can take a look at it. It's painted in Ferrari red. It's got the Ligor logo, which is beautiful. It's rim brake. This is, when I think bicycle in my mind, like when people think bicycle, Warren thinks commuter, I think Ligor Rotonda, like that's what I think about. And he's got zip wheels on there, thin tubes throughout, beautiful stuff. I find it interesting that he's based in Barcelona because it's the second Italian steel frame maker out of Barcelona that I talk about in my top 5. The other one was Belle, and this one is Ligor. So that's 2 Italian guys building frames out of Barcelona. Not sure what's going on in Barcelona to attract all these Italians to make beautiful bikes, but it's incredible stuff. If I had to own another steel frame, which I'm not sure I ever will, actually, I'm pretty happy with my Marinoni, but this would be it for me. Ligor, just absolutely incredible. So that's it. Top 5 small bike brands from Cycling Fashion Week. Okay, our last segment of the episode, and last but not least, Into the Canal is back. This is the segment where we take something we truly dislike from the world of cycling fashion and we toss it in Montreal's Lachine Canal. Who wants to start this week?
Mine is actually, it's kind of a listener submission in a way, but I agreed with them. We were DM'd on Instagram. We had posted a story mocking the common cycling hashtag outside is free, that cyclists often use on stories or posts with all their beautiful bike photos. And we made a joke about how once you spend $10,000, outside is free. I forget the listener's name who sent it in, and sound like a humble brag, because we get a number of DMs on our account. I was trying to find it to give him the proper credit. So message us again and we'll rectify that next week. Anyway, he said that outside is free, that the hashtag outside is free is the live, laugh, love of the bike world. And I couldn't agree more. I really don't like that hashtag, mainly because of the ridiculousness that to be spending like thousands upon thousands of dollars on all this stuff to enjoy the great outdoors when you can just go for a walk to enjoy the outside. And, maybe hikers, and I'm not on the hiker influencing Instagram feed, but, maybe they use that hashtag too. But the fact that cyclists are using that is like, what? And it's always like people like in these really well manicured photos where they probably, did 6 laps of a 30-meter stretch to get that perfect shot. They went on a ride purely to take photos to post on Instagram. That's the kind of people that are that using this hashtag. I think it really is. It's the live, laugh, love of the cycling world.
I think I finally found my reason for Strava was to make sure, like obviously I don't follow every influencer, but to make sure that they went for a ride when I see photos, right? Because it's like you've got friends or people you follow on there, and you go on Instagram and they got these beautiful photos. This now is the reason for Strava. It's I guess it's sort of the Strava didn't happen. Like, let me see what that ride was. Was that like a real ride that you happened to get a couple nice photos, or did you go out for 15K with your buddy with a camera like you're filming a Rafa commercial or something?
Okay, I'm going to go with my In the Canal for this week. So I'm actually going to be a little contrarian this week, going to go against the grain, the recent trends, and I am going to throw dropper seat posts into the Canal. Now, you may ask, why am I even bringing dropper seat posts up? Well, if you follow professional cycling, everyone's been talking about the dropper seat post assisted spectacular descent that saw Matej Mohoric win Milano-Sanremo, the first of the monuments, the classics of professional cycling this year. He had an incredible descent and he had a dropper seat post. For our road riders out there who don't know what a dropper seat post is, it's a pretty actually old technology that comes from big mountain bike that allows you to sort of easily adjust the height of your seat post on the fly. You can lower your seat post into the descent. Center of gravity is a little bit lower, can take perhaps more aggressive cornering in the descent. And that's exactly what Matej Mohoric did at Milano-Sanremo. And now what I find really silly actually is that you've got a whole bunch of road cyclists that are wondering, oh my God, I need a dropper seat post. This is the future of road cycling. This is a technology that I need to adopt. And my take is it's really not. First of all, it's so incredibly ugly. It just breaks the uniform nature of the vertical line from the seat post to the tube that's just below it. It is incredibly ugly. And also, I'm going to throw in the Canal recreational riders who care about their descending skills or how fast they descend. And just to give you an example, in Montreal, there I've talked about it on the podcast before. There's that climb in Montreal called the Camélien Oud, which is featured in the Grand Prix Cycliste de Montréal. It's the hardest climb in the world. It is the most difficult, most grueling col in the world. So you can imagine that descending it would be pretty intense as well. And there's people out there in the super tuck position descending this thing. If you do that, you're in the canal. No one cares how fast you descend as a recreational cyclist. We're all doing this for the climb, not for the descent. When I descend it, I'm on the brakes at 42 kilometers an hour. If you're going any faster than that, you're in the canal. And if you think that having a dropper seat post will first of all help you do that, you may be right, but you are extremely in the canal. Okay, Tony, canal this week?
My canal, and I thought of this before I heard of rock lobster, but I guess it sort of goes into that sense. I'm talking more about kit manufacturing clothing, but I guess it can extend to brand is well-designed kit with terrible brand names. There's a company, and I feel bad because I'm sure they're great people out of Belgium, called the Coffee Ride Apparel. And they actually make some beautiful looking kit. They've got a great color palette. Their cuts are nice. I've seen their stuff, but then they have the Coffee Ride Apparel across, and I just couldn't wear it. It's a cheesy name. It's a stupid name. I get that people like it. I'm sure they thought of it very clever on a coffee ride. Thought, oh, this is what people like doing, but it ruins what otherwise seems to be a very high quality, well-designed brand. So similar to Rock Lobster, which their frames look nice. I can't, I couldn't ride a bike that says Rock Lobster on it. I can't wear certain, there's other, I'm not, the Coffee Ride's an example. There's other brands. So think cleverly about your name. Maybe if you come up with a stupid name and you realize it after you started manufacturing, you switch to LCR apparel or something like that. Especially, again, if you are Belgian, I would also think it'd be cooler if it was a Flemish name, maybe. Like if you've got the culture, like go with your culture's name. But anyways, that's in the canal. Well-designed kits with terrible names.
I agree, Tony. I've actually turned a little bit on Café du Cycliste, partially because of that. And when you think about it, like, are you guys a coffee shop or are you a kit maker? It doesn't make sense. And we talked about UDog, right, on a previous episode. I think that would be in that category as well.
If they're listening, next collection, just put LCR. Panormal does the PNS, which has its own issues, but it's sort of that those kind of three letters kind of they do a good job with the design. So I think you could kind of bring it down. But
actually, I just ran Google Translate the Coffee Ride apparel to the Coffee Ride Kleding. That sounds a lot better, in my opinion.
Sounds fancy. It's Euro, so it's pro.
Okay, that's it for another episode of Cycling Fashion Week in the books. Thank you to all our listeners. You can reach out to us on Gmail at cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com or on Instagram. Send us a DM, leave us a comment at Cycling Fashion Week. And thank you again to our partners over at leclub.cc. Leclub.cc is the home to the most exciting, the hottest, the trendiest cycling brands at the moment. They are your go-to destination, your one-stop shop for all of this season's coolest premium cycling apparel. They've got MAP, they've got the service course, they've got Alba Optics, Fingers Crossed socks, Quack shoes, and new brands dropping very soon. They ship worldwide. They make amazing coffee. One of their coffees is called the Camélien coffee, hardest climb in the world. Definitely need that coffee to be able to climb it. Super nice team over at Le Club. They will hook you up with the coolest gear in cycling and the best coffee. Check them out, leclub.cc. Thank you very much. We will be back in a couple weeks with another episode of Cycling Fashion Week. Take care.